The Roman Empire was one of the most powerful and influential empires to have ever spanned the globe. At its height, over 1 in 4 human beings on the planet lived and died under Roman rule, and the empire spanned the 3 extremely diverse continents of Europe, Africa, and Asia, and contained some of the most ancient cities and civilizations in the entire world, such as ancient Egypt, Assyria, Israel, and Greece. Because of the span and might of the Roman Empire, today about 16% of the planet's population speaks an Italic or Romance language, meaning descended from ancient Latin. Before the Balkanization of the empire, or division into East and West, the empire had always been centered around the Italian peninsula, of course with the city of Rome being the capital and largest city until the collapse of the western half and rise of the Greek-dominated Byzantines in the east. Roman-style artwork, architecture, and customs, such as the modern Western handshake, have permeated many facets of our modern global culture, and most leaders of Rome, known as Caesars, had an insatiable lust for power, glory, and expansion of their already gargantuan territory. Fast forward about 1400 years since the fall of Rome, and the city is now run under a different banner. Although not a continuous dynasty, Italy is largely believed to be the successor state of the old Roman Empire, although in 1900 it was not nearly as influential or powerful as their precursor, largely being looked down upon by neighboring European countries and even Americans as poor, downtrodden, and fairly weak in the international playing field, especially in the realm of colonization of foreign lands. Even though Italy's population was comparable to that of Spain, France, and England at the time, after it was unified in the late 1800s, Italy had still yet to establish a vast network of global colonies and spread Italian culture throughout the world. Whether or not the Roman Empire could be classified as a colonial empire is up for debate, seeing how almost all of its territories were an integral part of the empire and citizens were granted equal rights regardless of region of origin, although the Romans heavily favored those born in the Italian peninsula. The young country of Italy strived for this vision as well, not wanting to merely conquer and enslave the populace of the territories it had colonized, but integrate them into a future Italian neo-Roman superstate as well. No other European power had successfully integrated foreign colonies in this way other than France with the incorporation of French Algeria and Russia with their incorporation of the Central Asian and Siberian territories. The beginnings of Italy's colonial endeavors began in the late 1800s with an Italian presence in the Horn African country of Eritrea, and quickly expanded to include the bulk of Somalia and Libya, which it had purchased from the swiftly dissipating Turkish Ottomans. In a matter of decades, the Italians had built themselves a respectable empire in their own eyes, but that didn't stop the government and people from desiring more power and more land. The ethnic and linguistic situation in Italy today is rather ambiguous and confusing to say the least, with the makeup of the country being much more complicated than simply everyone being ethnic Italians. The country can largely be divided into North and South from a cultural and linguistic standpoint, with the distinction between North and South Italians being very pronounced still to this day. The languages of northern Italy include Ligurian, Venetian, and Friulian, with the latter being especially divergent from Standard Italian, which is based in Rome. Sicilians, located in the southernmost island of Sicily, are also quite divergent from Standard Italians, with people from Sicily today being the most swarthy of all Italians, most likely due to North African admixture throughout the millennia, and the fact that fishing is a huge industry on the island, exposing the people to more sunlight. The Sardinian language spoken on the island of Sardinia is decisively a separate language from Italian, with linguists believing that Sardinian is the closest to what Old Latin sounded like 2,000 years ago. Although the island of Corsica currently belongs to the country of France to the north of Italy, what's interesting is that the Corsican language is actually more closely related to the northern varieties of Italian rather than Standard French, and thus has long been desired by Italian nationalists who see the island as a lost territory of Greater Italy. There are many non-Italic ethnic groups that have been in the country for hundreds, or in some cases thousands of years, with one of the oldest being the Grecos in the far south of Italy, who claim descent from ancient Greek colonies on the peninsula since antiquity, and still speak a dialect of Greek today. Albanian communities in southern and central Italy have been in the region for at least 600 years, and by some estimates number over 500,000, and still live in their own communities, with recent Albanian arrivals from Albania largely being absorbed into these towns. The largest non-Italic ethnic minority in Italy had always been the ethnic Germans from South Tyrol in the far north of the country, who have long had their own Austrian or Bavarian culture, and although there is currently no major movement for secession and incorporation into Austria, in the past Nazi Germany frequently pushed for Italy to relinquish the territory to their rule. One thing that a lot of people really misunderstood is the relationship between Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, with people generally believing that Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini were good friends. In reality, Italy was seen as the backwards, uneducated little cousin that the Nazis merely allowed to join their ranks out of convenience. Mussolini frequently tried to convince Hitler to declare the Italian people to be Aryan or honorary Aryans. However, Hitler refused every time, openly stating that he viewed the Italians as lazy, unintelligent, and overall inferior to the German people. This created strain on German-Italian relations, which could have led to potential conflict in the future had there actually been a global Axis victory, especially considering that the Nazis actually supported the Ethiopians during the Ethiopian-Italian War of the 1930s. At the start of World War II, Italy's empire outside of the peninsula largely consisted of the territories of Libya and the majority of the Horn of Africa, with Ethiopia eventually falling to the Italians in the previously mentioned war in the 30s, although they were able to temporarily stave off two full-scale invasions by Italian forces in the 1880s and 90s. These territories were far from a contiguous empire, with Anglo-Egyptian Sudan lying in between Libya and the Horn, and the Mediterranean lying between Libya and Italy. At the time, Italian Ethiopia, including Eritrea and Somalia, had a population of 10 million people, and Libya had less than 1 million, so it was fairly easy for Italy to maintain a dominating presence in these colonies. During the war, Italy went on to occupy Tunisia from France, along with the Balkan coast along the Adriatic Sea, including the bulk of the country of Greece, along with small sections of France and Egypt. Italy had plans for occupying and eventually incorporating the entirety of Anglo-Egyptian Sudan, along with possibly the whole of the Arabian Peninsula and the territories of Chad and Cameroon. Although these latter territories were not as pivotal to Mussolini as Egypt was, in Mussolini's eyes, the incorporation of Egypt with Italy would have been the start of his Neo-Roman Empire, which would encompass the bulk of the North African coast, the Balkans, and preferably the entire Mediterranean as well. Italian settlers, mostly made up of traders and farmers, were to be exported to these new territories, which at the time had a very minor population when compared to Italy's, with the potential North African population being only 20 to 25 million when compared to 50 million for Italy at the time. Hundreds of thousands of Italians had already settled in Libya and Eritrea, with they comprised about 10% of the population only a decade after the resettlement program. Although it would appear that Mussolini was unable or unwilling to commit mass genocide on the same level as the Nazis, the ethnic cleansing of the North African colonies was considered a vital process to future incorporation. Benito Mussolini's obsession with the old Roman Empire went far beyond its former land area, with their culture, attitude, and unparalleled military prowess, saying in 1922, when the fascists first rose to power, "Italy has been Roman for the first time in 15 centuries," referring to the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century. He greatly admired the Roman Caesars, especially Augustus, and viewed the Roman army as the peak of military discipline. Although old Roman culture was virtually absent from North Africa after centuries of Arabization, the Balkan territory still had a tentative connection to the Italian homeland. The former Roman province of Dalmatia, located in the modern territory of the former Yugoslavia, had become heavily altered over the past millennia, with the Croatians, Bosniaks, and Serbian ethnic groups being Slavic rather than Italic. However, there were still small pockets of Italic-speaking peoples descended from the early Romans in Dalmatia, such as the Istriots or Aromanians. If Mussolini had succeeded in invading Egypt and flooding these new colonies with ethnic Italians, incorporating them into the greater Italian Empire, it would have been a very interesting dynamic indeed. There would still be chunks of the former Roman Empire that would not be incorporated, such as Iberia, the Maghreb, and Anatolia, but it would immediately launch Italy into the status of a major power, having millions more square miles to its territory, including places that had never been a part of the Roman Empire, such as Sudan and the Horn of Africa. If Italy's plan had been executed in an effective way and the Axis powers had been successful in World War II, it could have become one of three dominating superpowers in the post-war period, along with Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany, which would be dominated by genocides, authoritarianism, and political extremes. In any case, it would certainly be interesting seeing Fascist Italy recreate the Roman Empire and the implications of such a bizarre plan. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on World War II and the colonial endeavors of Italy and Mussolini, and if you're new to the channel and haven't seen my last World War II video, where I discuss the implications of an Imperial Japanese victory, be sure to check it out and let me know your thoughts. As always, thanks for watching everyone. This has been Mason, and I'll see you next time.